Welcome to the Lester B. Pearson School Board Blended Online Learning Design Initiative. We will sometimes refer to this as the BOLD initiative. In this first video, we will give you a brief overview of BOLD, and we will also take a look at how to take a blended online learning design approach. First things first, why are we bringing you this initiative? We understand that everyone is looking forward to being back in the classroom as quickly and as safely as possible. We also realize that this is an opportune moment to develop skill sets and tool boxes that will serve you whether you are back in the physical classroom or in a digital virtual environment or a mix of all of the above. In light of that, ESD is proud to bring you this website, video series, and a range of resources and templates to boost all of your wonderful work for this school year and beyond. Before we go any further, we'd like to introduce ourselves. We are your BOLD co-hosts. I am Lori Hebert. I am the director of the Bay Area Blended Consortium. I have been involved in blended online learning initiatives since around 2013. I also have a background as a high school math, French, and technology teacher. I am very much excited to be partnering with Lester B Schools and the wonderful colleagues at ESD on this project.
And I'm Michael Gabe. I'm a social studies and computer science teacher in the Lester B Pearson School Board. These days I'm in educational services working on the transition to online teaching. And like Lori, I'm happy to be here and I'm looking forward to working with all of you as we take our next steps into online instruction. Let's begin by looking at the 10 videos that make up the BOLD series. We've presented them on screen in the order that we would recommend, but you're certainly welcome to jump to any one that interests you at any time. One suggestion would be to watch the first 3 before you jump anywhere else, however, just because they lay out a common framework for things that you're going to see in the rest of the videos. Speaking of a common framework, we've presented some terms that we'd like to review with you just to ensure that there's no confusion over definitions as we make our way through the series. The first term is asynchronous, and it refers to any activity your students take part in on their own time in a self-paced, self-directed fashion. So let's say you ask your students to go home and research something for use in the next class. Or let's say you flip your classroom and tell your students, go home and watch this video on your own time and be prepared to discuss it next class. That's an asynchronous activity. Your students will do that activity on their own time and at their own pace. A synchronous activity is one done in real time between you and your students or between themselves. So for argument's sake, you may be teaching them something on a whiteboard, or you may put them in a breakout room and ask them to debate an issue or solve a problem. These are synchronous moments between you and your students or between themselves. The next term is the online classroom. This is the digital space where you post information relevant to your class and your students interact with it as needed in an asynchronous fashion. So for instance, Google Classroom, where you may post instructions or activities and students will go there to post questions or download something that they need on their own time. That digital space is your online classroom. Your on-ground classroom is just another term for the brick and mortar location that you've been used to teaching at for the last X amount of years. It's your physical classroom in whatever school you've been assigned to. So an on-ground classroom is just a bit of an updated term for what we've been referring to as brick and mortar, but you'll hear both. A virtual class is where you meet with your students in a video conferencing tool like Zoom or Google Meet. So when you meet with your students on a daily or weekly schedule to do whatever it is you do, check in, teach, whatever the case may be, that's a virtual class. Last but certainly not least is the term blended. And blended refers to a combination of all the concepts we've just discussed, where when assembled or when combined, create a flow of education that is not bounded by time or space. So when your students are learning both in your brick and mortar or on-ground classroom, but when they're also meeting with you online when they're not able to be there, when they're able to go to your online classroom to get information at whatever moment they need it, but when they have synchronous moments with their peers and with you, or asynchronous moments when they're learning on their own, when you combine all of these things together, you have blended instruction.
Now that we have some good common vocabulary to work with, let's look at the top 3 reasons to strengthen your BOLD muscles. First and foremost, this is about staying connected with your students and helping them maintain their learning momentum no matter what. Secondly, this is an opportunity for you to boost your teaching practices using new skills and tools along the way. And last but not least, teachers who develop their bold muscles tend to find that these skills translate beautifully to the physical classroom, enhancing and extending all sorts of learning possibilities. Now, as we consider what blended online learning design looks like for Lester B schools, we found ourselves considering and thinking about the analogy of a blender and how you can make some pretty remarkable things using very simple ingredients, such as a smoothie. You could get by with 2 or 3 ingredients and come up with something pretty phenomenal. The same thing's true about taking a bold approach in this school year. So you'll have asynchronous ingredients and synchronous ingredients, digital, virtual, physical ingredients. And you can play with those ratios and add in other ingredients along the way. But we'd like to build off of that idea, the analogy of a blender and of a bold smoothie, and set the goal for everyone to be able to make a basic bold smoothie this school year using certain common ingredients, and with the open invitation, of course, to throw in other ingredients along the way to yield unique results.
Let's combine the smoothie analogy with the reality of teaching online, in that in both cases, you're going to need certain basic ingredients just to get started before you can even consider customizing it to your taste. From the teaching perspective, that means choosing an online classroom and virtual meeting platform. The online classroom, something like Seesaw and Google Classroom, which we discussed earlier, is where you'll post information relevant to your class, and your students will go interact with it on their own time, self-paced, self-directed, in an asynchronous fashion. The virtual meeting platform is your video conferencing tool, whether that's Zoom or Google Meet, and this is where, on a scheduled basis, daily or weekly, you'll meet with your students for those synchronous moments, teaching them something new, letting them interact with each other, etc. Now, you're absolutely welcome to choose a platform that is not one of the 4 we've got on screen, but these are the ones that Educational Services is best prepared and best equipped to help you with, whether your questions are pedagogical or technical in nature. Now, once you've settled on your 2 platforms, the next logical question is, how do I make this experience personal? How do I customize my blended instruction so it's a reflection of how I like to teach and the deliverables that I want from my students? Now, the good thing is that there's no shortage of third-party tools available on the internet that will allow you to do that. So let's say you like to do presentations on screen and have interaction with your students while that's happening. We'd point you towards Pear Deck and teach you how to use that. Let's say you want your students to engage in real-time debate and discussion, or perhaps asynchronous debate and discussion. We'd point you towards Kialo or Parlay. And maybe you want to gamify the act of learning. Well, we point you to Quizzes or Kahoot or Gimkit. But in a nutshell, there's literally no shortage of these sort of tools that allow you to customize the learning experience and the teaching experience for your students so that your blended instruction is a reflection of your style. On behalf of Lori and myself, thank you for watching this first video. Again, here's a list of all the videos in the series, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next one.